These days, silent film footage of Romanov royals being abducted, tortured, and murdered in 1916 is terrorism training course material. Terrorists in training study the footage and developed routines around it in depth, complete with instructions on what to study, what to memorize, and terrorism procedures on how to use it afterwards for organized crime purposes. Always working the no-sound angle. Distributed easily via email and other modern methods. It is relentlessly incessant now, on a larger scale than anyone could have possibly imagined after WW2. If a terrorist Brett doesn't get what it wants whenever it demands it, it does an impersonation of silent film footage of Romanov family royals being abducted, tortured, and murdered as emotional torment of its target, and makes demands again. Almost like programmed robots, still pretending it is a science magic torture spell, which will eventually result in anyone they target coughing up whatever it is they want to make them stop, and then move on to the next one. There is even a modern terrorism cult dedicated to trying to get people to make tortured or frightened noises they can record, to dub onto the 1916 silent film footage if the perpetrators decide it would fit the silent film recordings. They usually make demands the targeted victim impersonate the described silent film body movements of the victim and then make particular distress noises so they can see if it fits the footage when merged together. As if it drives lunatics crazy that they have all the silent film footage of the heinous crimes, but there is no audio and they just want to know what it sounded like. So they try to get matching noises out of their modern victims. Bizarrely wide-scale and incessant. I would even describe the routine as being used as a modern terrorism organized crime brat substitute for the old-fashioned public screaming tantrum, at times. The terrorism group's descendants and associates still have the Romanov Royal's non-authentic photography shoot clothing and props. They even sniff and touch the clothing of the Romanov victims from 1916 and describe the smell and feel to the people they are still victimizing about it, regularly me as the only remaining legitimate Romanov. As pitifully disgusting as the same lunacy with Frederick Hohenzollern IV's personal belongings illegally withheld from my Hohenzollern family by Australia since WW1. A small group of lunatics do the same thing with Frederick IV's personal items in Australia incessantly, that all belong to me. Touching and sniffing the previous owners, victims, clothing and personal artifacts does not transfer respectful opinion and fond ancestral memories of that person to the vile evil integrational stalker perverts who have the items and feel and sniff them. It is no magic spell. There is no way to force a swap of ancestral family history memories between a legitimate descendant like myself, who has normal good family ones, amongst others, and a person descended from or related to a perpetrator of abduction, torture and murder, where applicable, who only has their ancestral perpetrator's memories. They are stuck with theirs when they claim the crime is ongoing and they try to use theirs to upset others who have the family-oriented pleasant ones. Including incessantly fondling and sniffing victims' clothing etc. and describing it to someone like me 24 hours a day in shifts. As with the Hitler the Hohenzollern royal armbands off the dead NZ-born female genocide committing Morin, made over to look like Kaiser Adolf from that Berlin bunker in 1945, I don't want the clothing of my Romanov family from 1916 either. The props were exactly that, props, and were of no real financial or even sentimental value in any way. Lunatics always pretend items like that are overly important to descendants and family of the victims. I don't want the clothes or props from the shoot. The Tsarina and the 6 children were briefly illegally replaced with 7 hand-selected part Greek, Tasmanian, and North American imposters. Plus a part Indian and Netherlands man. The 8 imposters were pretending to be the Romanov royal family from a private location in 1917 afterwards and tried to run amok for Einstein where they could. The imposters were hand-selected by Einstein himself. They mainly tried to use written correspondence from their private location, where they pretended to be the Romanov royals, to supply scientists, intellectuals, philosophers, religious leaders, and teachers, etc., from the Soviet Union to the terrorism group. They often sat around using the deceased Romanov royals' photography shoot clothing and props. It was so that science and philosophy ideas could be stolen off them via torture and released in book form, with Einstein listed as the author. Large numbers of intellectuals went missing in the Soviet Union during 1917 after responding to fake Romanov correspondence and going to an appointment meeting place in response to the letters where they were abducted, too. Later that year the 8 imposters tried to start going out publicly pretending to be the Romanov royal family, very tentatively, as if they would be pretending to be my Romanov family, 4 generations. My great-grandfather Besaronis decided to attend an event they attended, to see his former lover Tsarina Alexandra in a rare public appearance with her husband and children. It became shockingly obviously clear to Besaronis the imposters were not the Romanov royal family very quickly. The imposters were eventually lured to a partially underground wine cellar with the promise of meeting someone famous they admired and gifts. They were promised contraband to keep and consume and some souvenirs. They waited nervously in the cellar for the meeting, armed with miniature Russian finger pistols, just in case. They were met at the cellar door by my irate great-grandfather, Besaronis Djugashvili, and some associates, who had confirmed the disappearance and murder of the Tsarina, his former lover and mother of his firstborn child, and her royal family. Besaronis and his associates ambushed them in the cellar, dressed as British Indian soldiers. They shot the imposters dead. It was a short but strangely prolonged confined gunfight. The rifles and finger pistols each party used all took an excruciatingly long time to reload. The imposters were dead, and Besaronis and his crew were all wounded when it was over, mainly in the general region of the hips. Their British Indian disguises were not an attempt to blame Brits, Indians, or part Brit Indians for what they did. The disguises were the only means to get to the confrontation in the cellar. The impostors did not, temporarily, become the Russian royal family until their deaths, even if their Morin descendants claimed they stole the royal family temporarily, and any action regarding me would be a stealing it back of for an eligible legitimate descendant. My great-grandfather Besaronis Djugashvili went to jail for the executions with his associates, sentenced to life without parole around the end of WW1. Besaronis died quietly in jail in the 1930s. The Romanov Royal Family Constitutional Monarchy of Russia was declared presumed vacant permanently at the end of World War I, with 2 deceased children yet to be accounted for. The 2 missing children's remains from 1917 were eventually found in 1990-91 and confirmed as the missing bodies by DNA comparison to the other 6 bodies found at the end of World War I. The DNA comparison included testing samples taken from the remains to compare to strands of hair Tsarina Alexandra had to leave with her coronation agreement. My grandfather Ioseb, Stalin, was therefore the only surviving child of the last monarch of Russia to have children. I am his only legitimate grandchild, with no legitimate descendants. After his mother and maternal siblings' murder, along with Nicholas II, he became the General Secretary of the Communist Party in Russia and Premier of the Soviet Union, the equivalent of Prime Minister or President in other countries. The concept that events in 1916, through to his rise in politics, were an anti-royal revolution of some kind is abhorrently disgusting and incorrect. Ioseb becoming political head of state in the Soviet Union was not part of their abduction and murder. More a passionate response to the heinous crimes committed against his maternal family, the Monarchy of Russia. He used his skills to foster good communism in Russia, aware that communism itself originated in what is now Gippsland, Australia. Along with every known species of rice in the world being native to what is now Gippsland, Australia, old city of Yarragon, Yarryalu and Gunakoni areas. The Romanov Royal Family Constitutional Monarchy of Russia had a Great-Grandchild Rule included in the coronation agreement Tsarina Alexandra signed off on at her coronation, with hair samples. It is almost exactly the same as the one that made me the legitimate Prince Imperial of my Hohenzollern Royal Family, Constitutional Monarchy of Germany, as successor to Kaiser Adolf and Wilhelm II. My grandfather Ioseb Stalin Djugashvili had me DNA tested, via a KGB collected hair sample, when I was 3. It confirmed me as his only legitimate grandchild. His meeting with the KGB involved an attempt at a long conversation about me and the future possible implications for the Russian monarchy. He cut that discussion short and focused on adding me as a beneficiary in his estate in 1975. Many people considered that the Soviet Union, 1920 to 1991, existed solely to find and identify the remaining 2 Romanov royal children's remains. When the 2 were finally identified, leaving me as the only possible technically eligible person to become a Romanov, the Soviet Union ceased to exist.